Hello everyone, welcome to my channel, and this is an educational channel. We try to inform you about some of the great theories of everything from the past, ancient and modern, mostly obscure, uh, from authors in general who put their whole life into something and probably didn't get their credit, didn't get paid, but did it because they believed in it. And generally, these theories of everything, all encompassing theories, cosmologies, grand unified theories, are things that you can use in your life for every aspect, especially things like your paradigm shifting, your awakening to 5D consciousness, your quest for better spiritual, mental, and physical health, your formation of a holistic worldview. And today is our 85th episode that we have done on the book called Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha from Dr. Daniel Ingram. And Ingram, well, we don't really even have to go over his past because we are currently reading from that section of the book where he goes over like where he came from. But mainly the reason I chose this book is because I think it's the best explication of Buddhism, not so much Buddhism per se, but the core teachings of the Buddha, in particular meditation, the techniques of meditation, the objects of meditation, the maps of our stages and states of consciousness that we cycle through as we improve on our meditation abilities. It's kind of just like a video game. You get to, I'd never really played video games, but, I know the general idea. If you can clear out one board, then you get to the next board. If you can master that board, then you get to the next board. And as you master these different cycles of the stages of insight, for example, you enlighten yourself by degrees. And your mind begins to work more quickly and efficiently, and so on. But right now we are in, I think, chapter 45 or so. That is on. Right now we're talking about his first retreat, or well, his first Far Eastern retreat. He has done a 9-day retreat in Boston. And now he has spent a year over in India, or he spends a year over in India. He went over there kind of under the guise of trying to pad his resume to get into medical school. So he's working at Mother Teresa's, place for poor, sick people, and then he catches every disease in the book multiple times, and he's, kind of overwhelmed by the streets of Calcutta and Bodh Gaya, and is living in an air-conditioned place and eating the worst food, and just like things sound very terrible. And so we'll pick up from approximately where we left off last time. After a few weeks at Mother Teresa's, I switched to a street clinic called Calcutta Rescue, about 45 minutes north of the hotel by bus, where I mostly worked in the pharmacy and the vitamin A project, but did a few other office and logistical tasks as well. The clinic saw about 200 to 500 patients per day, and more patients down the road by the river at an affiliated clinic for those with leprosy. We got there early, stayed late until everyone had been seen, then would take the buses home through the maddening Indian traffic to the hotel, cook food, try to sleep in the sweltering heat, get up and do it again. The patients were generally extremely poor, many with tuberculosis, many with other serious health issues already mentioned, many with parasites, some starving, and we would try to give them what food and medications, as well as wound care and other helpful things we could, depending on what we had available at the time. I remember a mother who had a few children with her, one of whom was a little girl who appeared extremely tired, sick, and emaciated. The child was probably 2 years old, but functionally she seemed like a very sick 1-year-old. Through a translator, I asked the mother what was wrong with the girl, with apparent calm dispassion that likely masked terrific agony. The mother explained that she was starving her daughter to death, something the mother had done with previous daughters, as she was very poor, had no money for the girl's dowry, and needed to be able to feed her sons. That is one of many similar encounters I would have at that clinic, that if that gives you a sense of the place. While there was something about the fact that we were all there to help that did make the misery more bearable, still, those sorts of situations can strike very deeply, sometimes deeper than we may realize at the time. I remember the heroin addicts who lived in the alley just outside the hotel door. There were typically 5 or 10 of them, long-haired, naked, skinny as rails, covered in dirt and ash, and covered in sores from infections by dirty needles. I recall some lying there, high as kites, others clearly in withdrawal, shaking and vomiting, others shooting each other up with little brownish vials of cheap heroin. What I noticed is that nearly everyone in India seemed to want to interact with tourists except the heroin addicts. They didn't look at us, didn't seem to see us at all, did never say anything to us, as though they were existing in some parallel ghost realm that was only loosely connected to this one. I can't help but think of them 2 decades later whenever I hear the phrase hungry ghost realm. I remember coming home from the street clinic one day, and there was one of them lying on the ground with his arm deep into the open sewer that ran along the alley, slowly crawling along, arm about 2 feet into the sewage, apparently looking for something. I was curious, and as the heroin addicts never interacted with us at all, I stopped to watch what he was doing. He ignored me and my curiosity entirely. For about 5 minutes, he felt along the bottom of the sewer, carefully, patiently inching his naked body along the ground, and finally he stopped. A small smile crossed his face, and he pulled out a syringe from the bottom of that Calcutta sewage. He licked the bare needle, broke off the top of a small vial he had concealed in his other hand, drew up, shot up right there, and lay back in a daze on the street, dirty needle still hanging from his arm. Struck me that when you are shooting up with a needle from the bottom of a Calcutta sewer, you have likely fallen much lower than you ever thought you could fall. I wondered at that point who he had been before, what his parents felt about him, what any children he had might have felt about him, and how much longer he could possibly live. That snapshot of his suffering would be driven even more deeply home some months later. I was again coming home from the clinic and saw the same man sitting on the street, cross-legged and crying, tears streaming down his face. In his hand was a single white index card that was perfectly clean. He had managed to gather 7 extremely small pieces of colored chalk in a little pile on the ground to his side and had drawn a rainbow on the index card. He was staring at the rainbow and crying his eyes out. I realized there was likely nothing at all I could do for this man, but something in his weeping humanized him for me, such that months of being in shock could no longer be kept at bay. It felt like the man had torn my heart out, as if suddenly the pain I had somehow managed to numb partially so that I could do the work and live as I was living came crashing in with the full force of a tsunami. The hairs on my arms still rise now, over 20 years later, when I think of him. I am deeply grateful to that naked, dying, addicted artist, though I would greatly prefer that he hadn't been dying in misery on the streets of Calcutta and that I hadn't needed something like that to shock me into realizing what was going on. It is said that the Buddha left his pleasure and distraction filled life in the palace for the first time at age 29 with his charioteer Channa, and saw four people, an aging man, a sick man, a dead man, and an ascetic, trying to find the end of suffering, and rapidly came to deep conclusions about the nature of suffering right then. I was obviously dense as a post in comparison. I had also come from a sheltered palace, suburban North Carolina, and it took some 6 months in India, seeing tens of thousands of people suffering in horrendous ways, until finally something in that moment with the weeping addict slapped me into reluctant appreciation for the depth and realities of human suffering. Shortly thereafter, I felt a deep need to go on retreat, so off to Malaysia we went. While this, he's with his first wife here. I think this was before they got married, but they eventually did. While this may sound like a horribly cliched thing to say, I am truly, consciously, and actively grateful every single day that I am lucky enough to live in a remarkable place, have good food to eat, have good medications, and amazing resources to help patients. I am very grateful that I have my health and that I didn't end up dying some horrible death in India. Lack of gratitude is endemic where I live, which is ironic, as it is the richest country on earth. It is also worth mentioning that I didn't go to India with the intention of purifying my karma or anything like that. I went to help people, for meditation, for adventure, to try to resolve my spiritual crisis, and to learn something about myself and the world. But I don't remember ever thinking while I was there, wow, I hope all this hard work, suffering, and accumulated good karma from serving the destitute gets me a good rebirth or gets me to stream entry fast. In retrospect, I do believe in some way that a strict scientific materialist might think was some mix of crazy and or irrational, that somehow doing all that work there did help to purify something karmic and help my meditation practice, probably much more than I will ever know. That was never my goal, intent, or even thought at the time, as I just didn't know any better. Beyond the karmic opportunities, which you will find anywhere, there are people. India had many other remarkable, anywhere there are people, India had many other remarkable qualities. Out of that muck and insanity come extraordinary things. It is not just ancient India, the India that brought us the Vedas, the Upanishads, and the Buddha Dharma, but also modern India. There are deep aspects of spirituality and beauty to be found there. I met true living saints there who were humbly and inconspicuously serving some of the most impoverished people in the world. I met numerous people with deep spiritual realizations, many of whom were seemingly ordinary folk doing very ordinary things. I met people who were amazingly happy, bright, and cheerful despite circumstances that would bring many to unmitigated despair. I remember the many street children I got to interact with, and the children out in the very poor villages where we tried to help. Those with the physical and mental ability to do so played, laughed, joked, danced, skipped, and seemed to enjoy themselves despite being among the most underprivileged people in the world and dealing with circumstances that modern civilization, if it actually is that, should have eliminated long ago. I often find myself thinking back to those kids and the profound lessons their sunny attitudes and just being themselves taught me. And that however bad I may think I have it, it could be a hell of a lot worse. For most people and creatures on this planet, it is. That recognition naturally prompts gratitude, and that helps immensely when I am faced with the comparatively milder challenges of my daily life. As the Alanis Morissette song says so well, thank you, India. Another practical point here is that should you find yourself in your meditation practice or just your life feeling sorry for yourself or becoming overwhelmed by your issues in life, particularly if your circumstances are in relative terms and compared to the rest of the world good to great, then think about stepping outside your comfort zone and going to try to help someone less fortunate than yourself. The very least you will learn is that you could have it much worse. Far beyond that, you will likely make friends, help people, and spread the spirit of doing good in the world. And you will likely be cured of self-pity forever, or for a long time. Well, maybe so, but you also might spread your own diseases to them. Even beyond that, as you probably already know, you will likely learn very important lessons from the people you find in the ditches, deserts, and dungeons of this world, as many who live there have had to learn profound spiritual lessons to survive, lessons you might not yet know, or at least such has been my experience. Thus, should you go to help people, expect them to be the ones helping, growing, and blessing you, though not in the ways you likely expected. Just as many of the best addiction counselors are themselves recovering addicts, and many of the best psychiatrists have their own experiences with crazy. Just so, many people who are living at the proverbial bottom of the barrel of the world have had to grow spiritually in surprising ways to cope with that. Further, many of the other people you find alongside you helping to ease the world's suffering may be living saints in disguise, and there is much to be said for hanging out with living saints. Getting out of our palaces and bubble bath zones, assuming we are lucky or unlucky enough to be living in them, and getting our hands dirty helps broaden our horizons, expands our awareness, and makes this process about something much bigger than ourselves. Even if you are just a complete spiritual materialist or narcissist concerned only with your own spiritual growth, development, and attainments, there is much there for you in the world of serving others, which, word has it, is the point of all these traditions. Paraphrasing the 14th Dalai Lama, if you are going to be selfish, be wisely selfish, and do what is truly in your own best interest, which in this case means trying to help others. In that same vein, as it were, I believe that the experiences I had while trying to help people, but often failing to make what seemed like any significant difference, getting sick and realizing that I had it pretty darn good, helped me to get over myself just a teensy bit. Thus, when I was finally able to go back on retreat in Bodh Gaya, retreat seemed like such a refuge, such a blessing, so precious, so clean, so sane, so safe, so stable, so beautiful, so quiet, and such a fortunate set of circumstances that I could make much better use of that time, because the contrast with Calcutta and the outside world helped me to truly cherish the incredible opportunity I had. Death by disease, auto accident, or other bizarre circumstances no longer seem to be just moments away, as it had so often seemed on the outside. Here on the retreats were order, true civilization, clarity, peace, and an opportunity finally to go deep, to see how to deal personally and directly with suffering. Undistracted by the colorful madhouse that was the streets of India, I could let my guard down and plunge deep into the waters of techniques and teachings that also originated in the wonderful, profound aspects of India. Thus, what might conventionally be thought of as the good and the bad of India were both of supreme value. Finally, and that is one of the lessons that slowly sank in during that year or so and in the years that followed. All right, that's the end of that chapter, which was actually chapter 47. Chapter 48 is called The First Bodh Gaya Retreat. Speaking of retreats and backtracking just slightly to the beginning of my time in India before I went to Calcutta, the next time I crossed the arising and passing which is stage 4 of insight meditation, which is a big milestone, was about 5 months but you can reach that without meditating. So it's a wondrous event that can really change you, but it doesn't necessarily have to come within the context of meditation. And he feels like it happened to him a couple times when he was like a little kid, or once as a teenager. So the next time I crossed the arising and passing was about 5 months. Another point to make is that the arising and passing away is immediately followed by the dark night of the soul, which is stages 5 through 10, which are called dissolution, fear, misery, disgust, desire for deliverance, and reobservation. So the next time I crossed the arising and passing was about 5 months after the August 1994 retreat. I was then 25 years old. I was on my second insight meditation retreat, this time during a 17-day course at the Thai monastery in Bodh Gaya, India, with Christopher Titmuss, Sharda Rogel, Subhana Barzakhi, and Norman Feldman, and Fred von Allman. I don't really remember much about it, except that it left me feeling very inspired about practice and very dark about the world. However, 3 formative events stuck out. The first was when Subhana Barzakhi, one of the meditation teachers on that retreat and a dual lineage Zen master and Vipassana teacher, answered a question from a retreatant during a small group session. In that answer, she described how she would meditate on the breath for an hour or so and then attain a fruition. She described it as if she was describing any other ordinary activity. There was nothing cryptic about it, nothing mysterious, nothing guru, shishi, nothing pretentious, nothing self-effacing, nothing taboo. It was just straight up reporting of her experience, her capabilities, her practice, articulated like it was the most natural thing in the world, like she was talking about what she had for lunch. It was the first time that I had ever heard that done in a way that was so down to earth and real, so straightforward, and by example, so empowering. That experience would form the basis of the model I would later adopt, advocate for, attempt to emulate, and encourage. I offer Subhana very special thanks for showing me that it is possible to discuss deep practice as we would discuss any other ordinary activity. Second, I remember Norman Feldman's late night readings, particularly his reading of the Pali Sutra that would later become one of my favorites. Majjhima Nikaya 121, called The Shorter Discourse on Voidness. I found its words spellbinding, and the thought arose, this is it. This is the real thing. To this day, I still think that. I am very grateful for him sharing that text with us by candlelight late that memorable chilly night. Third was Christopher Titmuss himself, for whom I have profound gratitude. His embodiment of awakening as a living truth was palpable, open, and inspiring. His cultivation of awakened teachers around him, who were from not only various strains of Buddhism, but also from traditions outside Buddhism, embodied a spirit of pragmatism and non-dogmatism regarding awakening as a human right rather than the property of some religion. That was a rare example of what is possible in terms of Dharma cooperation. His message of engagement with life in all its rich and complex tragicomic glory, delivered from a place of awakening and encompassing a full range of powerfully articulated emotional reactions to a wide range of real-world topics, modeled lessons that it would take me years to assimilate. Inspired by that retreat, I tried to sit for an hour every day and managed to do that most of the time. Those sits resulted in no particularly interesting insights or anything else that stands out, but I do suspect that just trying to keep up some basic skills helped. As noted above, after a few weeks volunteering at Mother Teresa's original home for the dying destitute at Caligai, I began to volunteer full-time in a large outdoor street clinic in the northern slums of Calcutta called Calcutta Rescue, where I would serve for the next 5 months, mostly in the pharmacy and the vitamin A project. Okay, and that's the end of the chapter. The next chapter is called The First MBMC Retreat. Finally, the internal pressure took over and I had to go on retreat again. So I went to Malaysia and sat at the Malaysian Buddhist Meditation Center with Sayadaw U Ranjita for 2 weeks. And that is when, from my point of view, I really learned to practice. It was about a decade after the first time I had crossed the arising and passing. And I was about to learn what the arising and passing away actually was, which seems a bit late, but that's the ignorant, meditationally primitive Western world we live in. This was the first time I was introduced to noting and the maps, as it was my first Mahasi-style course. I had done more freestyle, Thai-style Vipassana with Christopher Titmus and crew, and this had built some meditation skills, but I didn't start noting until this retreat. Initially, I was bad at noting, wanting to intellectualize everything, trying to note a decent amount, but not enough to get into any interesting territory or notice much about what was going on. About 5 days into the course, if I remember correctly, I was sitting outside Sayadaw's room and could hear a young Malaysian woman giving a simple, clear report of her ability to see thought as thought, intentions as intentions, mental images as mental images, and to see the physical sensations that were interspersed with these and how each led to the other. I came into the room all jacked up on my intellect and basically talking out of my head about some philosophical bullshit that I can't now remember specifically. And the Sayadaw just smiled and said, "That woman, did you hear her? She sees cause and effect." The message was very clear in that instant. Shut up, quit thinking, and practice. Or at least that was what I took him to be saying. It was very humbling, as I was basically an arrogant brat, still am, some would argue. But I had been totally schooled by this retreatant who hadn't even been there quite as long as I had. I decided to really buckle down and note like crazy, and that is when the interesting stuff started to happen. Was this the competitive urge being used skillfully? Was I just too cocky to be outdone? Did I just suddenly learn something valuable from that practitioner and apply it? Was it all of those? Probably. Regardless, it worked. About 2 days later, my breath began to move with the noting. I would note rising or falling, and the breath would rise or fall in nearly perfect synchrony with the duration of the note, and then stop. So each stuttering breath became like rapid sniffing and took many notes. Otherwise, the breath would just stop. This was cause and effect, though I didn't know it at the time. Cause and effect is the second insight stage. The same thing happened when I walked. The feet would move exactly with the notes, with rapid movement of the feet causing rapid noting, and rapid noting causing rapid, jerky movements of the feet. During sitting sessions, things started to get wild, all just from noting everything that was going on. The rapidity of everything in the body jerking in conjunction with the noting got faster and more powerful, so that I shook, sniffed, sweated, and noted for days. And between bouts, I would plunge down with the breath as it went down and down and down into a realm of extremely slowed perception and time, like reality was moving through thick narcotic syrup. And then the energy would come back, and the rapid noting, sniffing, and the now powerful vibratory energy would return. I would cycle like this again and again. The whole thing was freaking me out a bit. So I went to Sayadaw U Ranjita and told him what was going on and that I was concerned. And he simply said, "Not dangerous, keep noting," and smiled. Okay, we're going to stop right there. We will return to Dr. Ingram's saga of his meditational, hijinks, whatever. And we will return tomorrow and resume at the same location. Thanks for tuning in today, and have a great day.